Welcome to the OpenJ9 community call for March 10th. If you haven't already, please add your name and company affiliation to the minutes. So unless anyone has anything urgent that they want to bring up, I think we have a lightning talk from Marius today. Marius, if you're talking, we can't hear you.
No, I'm not talking.
Okay.
Okay, let me share my screen then for the presentation. Yeah, you should be seeing my screen now. Let me go. Yeah, full screen. Okay, so I'll start. So for this lightning talk on JITServer, I thought I would start with a retrospective of 2020. So 2020 was a very fruitful year for us. So we officially released JITServer as a tech preview on all three major Linux platforms. And now users can easily go and download OpenJ9 JVMs with JITServer from the Adopt OpenJDK website, soon to become Adoptium. JITServer code used to depend on some third-party library for data serialization. That's the protobufs library. And we've eliminated that dependency and written our own serialization code. So this not only made the build process simpler, but also reduced the overhead and improved the performance. Talking about overhead, last year we managed to cut down the networking overhead by some hefty 35%. And as a result, currently the JVM clients use 87% less CPU in their compilation threads compared to a vanilla OpenJ9 JVM. We've taken steps to improve JITServer scalability by eliminating some global synchronization, and we've made JITServer more resilient to low memory situations. Moreover, we added many RAS features that should help diagnose problems when they appear. We've also performed some experiments in Amazon Cloud to showcase the JITServer advantages when running in VMs. And in summary, in those experiments, we observed 4 to 10% smaller startup time, anywhere between 23% and 78% better throughput for short-running applications, and 50% smaller peak memory consumption, which should allow a higher density of applications for a given amount of hardware, and therefore reduced costs. And finally, we have an ongoing collaboration with U of T about server-side AOT caching, and that code starting now to be merged into the OpenJ9 codebase. So one of our intentions is to demonstrate the value of JITServer when running in OpenShift. And to that end, we've designed a few scenarios. In the following, I'm going to present you only one of those scenarios, the most recent that we have. And when designing this, we started from two key observations reported by various sources. So the first observation is that in practice, machines are typically very low utilized, somewhere between 5% and 30%. And the second observation is that many workloads are highly variable. And this is somewhat tied to the first observation in the sense that if we are provisioning the machines for the peak utilization and the workload is highly variable, meaning that it reaches peak only for brief periods of time, then the average utilization is going to be naturally low. So consequently, we've designed a low utilization scenario. And this slide includes all the assumptions that we are making. By the way, this scenario runs in OpenShift, which runs on IBM Fire Cloud. So we assume that the user has 6 different applications or deployments. So for me, a deployment means one application. So the deployment is the term used in Kubernetes. So the user has 6 different applications, and she wants to run these in an OpenShift cluster. On the figure here, you see different boxes in different colors. So a color means a particular application or a particular deployment. And one application can be backed by several different replicas. So even though there are 6 different applications here, for simplicity, I'm actually running the same application replicated 6 times. But in the future, we plan to use different applications like Pet Clinic, Day Trader, maybe Acme microservices, and so on. So each deployment in this experiment, each of the 6, is served by 3 JVM replicas. And having more than 1 pod replica for a service is typically done for redundancy purposes, to ensure that the application continues to run if a pod or even if an entire machine suffers a fault. Each JVM is limited to 1 CPU and half a gigabyte of memory, and it is a recommended practice to set requests and limits for pods. Moreover, smaller pods give Kubernetes scheduler more flexibility in finding nodes with enough free resources. If you look at the figure, the cluster is overcommitted in terms of CPU, in the sense that the sum of all the CPU limits across all the pods exceeds the CPU available on the machines. And this is totally fine in these low CPU utilization experiments. On the other hand, we did not overcommit on memory because that would increase the likelihood of an out-of-memory scenario, leading to a JVM being terminated. So memory is typically called an uncompressible resource because if the application does not have it, it cannot run, while CPU is compressible because applications will take advantage of context switching when there isn't enough CPU around. So even if you don't have enough CPU, the application will continue to run just slower. So taking all this into account, in order to host these 6 applications, we need 3 nodes, and 2 nodes will not do, memory being the limiting factor. So now let's see if we can do better with JITServer. So on this slide on top, I have the same figure that you've seen on the previous slide, while below it's the JITServer configuration. With JITServer, the peak memory consumption of the JVMs is reduced because compilations are offloaded to the JITServer. So this allows us to fit the 18 JVMs in just 2 nodes instead of 3, even after we account for the presence of the JITServer itself. So all in all, with JITServer, we can increase the application density and therefore reduce costs. Now let's see if the 2 configurations can achieve the same throughput. Following the observations that in practice machine utilization is low, we applied a low amount of load to all 6 deployments concurrently. So how low is low? To give you an idea, we monitor the CPU utilization and observe that each JVM uses anywhere around 11 to 12% CPU. I should also mention that the level of load in these experiments is constant throughout. In the future, we plan to use variable load to better simulate a real-world scenario. By the way, all the experiments that I'm going to mention next were performed by Imo Nelsaban, and many thanks to her for doing this. So now let's look at the throughput. So the graphs shown here plot the average throughput of the 6 deployments. So all of them run the Acme application. So let's look at the graph on the left here. So the JITServer configuration is in blue. And as you can see, it lags slightly compared to the baseline in the beginning. But then after all the compilations are performed, it manages to achieve the same level of throughput. The slower ramp up that you see in the beginning is due to the fact that 18 JVMs require compilation services at the same time from the JITServer. So it's a bit too much for one instance of the JITServer. On the right, I have the same experiment, but load on the 6 applications is applied in a staggered fashion with 30 seconds in between. So this is probably more likely to happen in practice. And as you can see, the ramp up for the first 50 seconds is much better now with JITServer. The takeaway from this slide is that the JITServer configuration manages to achieve the same level of throughput with 33% less cost. That's 2 nodes compared to 3 nodes. Now, let's see what we plan to do in the future. So in terms of future work, we plan to increase the realism of our experiments by using different applications like Data7, Pet Clinic, maybe even Admir microservices. We plan to use variable load instead of constant load. And we plan further along to use automatic scaling. So rather than having a fixed number of pods, let Kubernetes or OpenShift to increase the number of pods based on load. And all of this should culminate with some experiments with OpenShift on Amazon Cloud or IBM Cloud. Of course, these future steps are on top of our plans to GA this technology in fall together with Java 17 LTS. And in that respect, we need to clean up the code more from intermittent bugs, add support for some new features like the new implementation of method handles, maybe improve performance further with AOT server-side caching and so on. And this concludes my presentation. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. Any questions from the audience?
Thanks, Marius.
Okay, thank you.
Looks very promising. Thank you.
I stop sharing.
All right, moving back to the agenda. User raised issues. I've taken a look. There's one issue in the past week, and the proper people have been notified about it. Does anyone have anything else they want to discuss in the user raised issues? I don't think the Docker Hub chart is available. So no an issue at adopt.
Yeah, the dashboard is down right now.
Okay, so looking at the 26 release, we have done our code split, created the branches for 0.26. We've tagged for the M1 and the builds, the test builds have started at adopt OpenJDK, and I see a few issues have been raised for failures this morning. Just a question about external OpenJDK testing. There's a couple issues raised for external OpenJDK in those milestone builds that haven't been raised before. Is this something new that's running, or?
Do you mean the extended OpenJDK?
Yeah, extended, sorry.
Yeah, so a lot of those test cases have failed numerous times before, and we have reported them, only just reported them in the triage summary because we've not tended to take too much notice of the extended. But I thought, we need to at least do something with these so that we can either resolve them or exclude them or something, because it's causing extended triage time, us going through them. So if we can sort them out one way or other, it makes our triage effort a lot easier.
Yeah,
So
I think there's two efforts to triage it. LongU on the OpenJ9 side is also looking at those, but we had, Lan can speak to this better, but we had blanket excluded a few of the top level targets from extended OpenJDK. But for the ones that Andrew appears to have raised today, those are test classes within targets that are still, they're not, we chose not to disable the entire target because there may be 400 test cases and one failing one within it, or one failing one.
And I wouldn't say there's a huge number. Yeah, there's probably, I might have raised about 10 or so.
Yeah, I think our first, unless it's obviously a machine issue that can be resolved quickly, we'll just add them to the problem list and exclude them. Yeah.
Yeah, because that will save us time of,
they won't be noise. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. So that's why
And
you've
if we
seen
do
them, Peter.
if we do the problem list approach, then we can still be running the other 399 tests that are within that target. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's taken a bit of effort to go through it today, but I think it's worthwhile just to clean things up a bit.
Yeah, and then some of them I think are intermittent.
They must
So,
be. Yeah. I
especially
think some of them are related to running in Docker containers, by the way, with the change to use some of these statically configured Docker containers. We certainly are seeing some issues. Recently, as in an hour ago, I merged something from Stuart so that we aren't miscalculating the number of resources available to us. And I think that'll resolve some of the time JDK time failures and that you'll see on a Docker machine, but not on a static machine. So it might be worth, we'll run them one more time with Stuart's change in or grind them on the Docker machines if it looked like it was related. But probably just exclude them.
Yeah. So I did a bit of analysis on some of them, sort of think, is this likely a J9 problem? And if so, raised at J9. Otherwise, if it's affecting both hotspot and J9, it's likely either a machine issue or a Docker issue or an upstream issue. So I raised that.
Even if it only fails on OpenJ9, we probably need some more diagnostics. Like it's not obviously like a VM crash or a grid issue.
Yeah, just add your comment. I have seen your comments. I've just not got around to getting back and answering them. So I will do that later.
Yeah. So unless we can tie it to a particular component, and I know that we've had lots of these type of issues in our backlog for quite some time. I don't know that they're going to get a lot of attention.
Right.
But more generally, Pete, the extended functions are on our weekly cycle, which wasn't enabled until relatively recently, and I think it's fair to say we're still trying to establish our baseline for those across both hotspot and OpenJ9. But we thought it's about time we get them on the table, or they'll never get resolved.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it includes those security groups, which I think are prioritized from what Long Yu and Lan are looking at.
Yeah, so there was one OpenSSL issue that was raised a month or so or two ago, and I believe we're narrowing in on a fix for that one.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, so I mean, for now, and especially for next week, a bunch of these will probably get excluded in the problem list, but it's worth looking at because I think some of them would be actual issues rather than test config or something.
Yeah, I just, like I said, unless we can pin it to a component, I don't know that the J9 project is going to have the resources to triage and try to figure out what's going on.
Yeah, I can't believe you don't have an army of triagers. No, it's good.
Okay, unless there's anything else for 0.26, we'll move on to 0.25. So that release, I've tagged it, it's ready to build. That can be started tomorrow or whenever Adopt is ready to build. It's good to go. Hopefully there won't be any new surprise levels that show up from OpenJDK, but it seems very unlikely. So I know Devin's still working on Cmake for Win32, so I guess we'll still be building with UMA for this release. But we've completed our switch to mixed refs. Nothing, we didn't see any issues come out of that, except there was the performance question about JDK 8. I don't know if Sharon, if you have any update on that.
Yep, so for JDK 8, last week I mentioned there might be a regression and some perf tests were done in the meantime. And it looks like there is a minor throughput regression of about 1 to 2% for 8. And so we are going to look at getting some profiles so that we can get some more insight into where that regression is coming from.
Okay, great. then does anybody have information about the Docker changes? It says, Simon, you're to confirm the build team is ready to do whatever needs to be done to release on Docker.
Are you muted, Simon?
Yes. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I've added it to the release plan, but I haven't actually confirmed that anyone knows what it is that they've got to do yet. Thanks for reminding me. I'll poke somebody.
Okay, thanks. I guess doing 16 for the 0.25 release will be a heads up for what needs to be done for all the versions for the 0.26 release.
Yeah, definitely.
So one question, Pete. When are you thinking of putting the final tags on for 16, if you haven't already done it?
Yeah, it's done.
Okay, cool.
So the builds can start anytime. We just don't want to publish those until next Tuesday when either Oracle or OpenJDK does a publish.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so we can move on to the regular adopt update.
Yeah, and I guess we've already talked about the release somewhat. Thanks for Simon to summarize the release plan in that issue 206 based on what was discussed in last week's call here. I think given that there are tags and we have the plan in place, we'll be able to hopefully have a smooth release week. Related to that, and part of the transition to Eclipse Foundation, we have the CQs for all of the Adoptium and Aquavit repos ready to have been approved. So we're thinking to take the opportunity while we're in a code freeze for the release to create the new repos in the Adoptium organization. And after the release is finished, immediately after the release is finished, attempt to shift our Jenkins jobs over to use the new test repos and then close the Adopt OpenJDK test repos to be read-only. So the good thing is it won't be a whole lot of work because we auto-generate test jobs, but we will coordinate with LAN and the OpenJ9 team, which I am still part of, but we will coordinate to make sure that the same thing happens at the OpenJ9 server, and presumably some folks will have to make sure that that happens internally as well. Worst case is you're still using the read-only Adopt OpenJDK repos and you're not picking up new changes. But best case is we switch everyone over and things run smoothly. That's all I had.
Hopefully it'll go as smoothly as switching to mixed refs.
Yeah. Well, we think we've identified all the points that need to be changed, and there aren't many. So yeah. The good thing is it'll be right after release, so we'll have, you know, a bit of padding to work things out. I'm hoping it's not more than a day of, oops, we forgot this thing, or so hopefully there will be little to no disruption.
I noticed, Shelley, that you added a comment. There's a release item at Adopt, and we were talking about building in advance, and you like that idea. But it does only work when we have new versions of Java. It doesn't work for the quarterly releases because we don't have the final code changes until the release day.
Yeah. So I recognize that. I think as long as we make a plan that everyone understands and follows, I'm good with that. If we could get ahead of things, that's great. But if it's going to cause confusion for people, then because it's only in certain scenarios, we have to make sure we're not being too convoluted. So I don't know, Simon, do you have for this upcoming release? I presume we'll still wait till next week to kick things off?
Sorry, what kind of things?
To kick builds off.
I was going to kick them off
No?
Well, for the JDK 16.
Okay.
Yeah, I was going to kick them off tomorrow.
Oh, okay, great. So I'm the one way behind here because I've been working on Eclipse transition stuff. So that's good. I
Yeah,
like
so
that
plan
plan.
is-
starting
Sorry,
tomorrow. So we did put in a change since milestone 3. It has been tested in the headstream, and I did a spot test on one platform
Yeah.
after putting in that change. So we're not expecting any problems, but starting tomorrow, in case there is a problem, that gives us a chance to try again
Yeah.
and still have a build on next Tuesday.
No, that sounds good. I'm about to drop from this call to go to the regular Aquavit meeting where I was going to announce that we're frozen. So no changes unless they're fixing things or executing tests. And yeah, this will work well.
Okay, just before you leave, I know Dan has added something to the end of the agenda. He wants to move the time of this meeting.
Yeah, it would work for me too, because I'm missing something that I should be at by attending this. That's why I've only been alternating and being here every other week.
Yeah, so you could think about Thursday at 11 instead of Wednesday at 11, if that works for you. And then I'll update the minutes with whatever comes out of that discussion when we get to it.
Okay, yeah, I'll add some note on the bottom for better opportunity. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye. Okay, so that takes us to our machine update.
Hello. Sorry, let me scroll down. So we resolved the Windows cleanup issue last week. Joe's PR got merged, so that seems to be okay now, as far as I know. Space issues on master were resolved by Eclipse removing all the dead workspaces, and we're going to have them remove all the workspaces on master on the next maintenance day, or every maintenance day, hopefully. These are just the Git repositories that get created on master that have no real effect if we remove them, because they just get recreated on the next build. And then outer space for Artifactory, so we reduced from 35 to 30 days, and that helped give us some breathing room, and I have seen the space start to come down over the last couple days. It was up 1% today, so we'll have to keep an eye on it, but I'll leave it at 30 days for now and go from there.
Yeah, it seemed to come down quite a bit rapidly, so maybe we had a few days where there's a lot of things that got archived.
Right.
Hopefully, if it doesn't start going up again, we can move it back to 35.
Right. I did notice that the Arch machine was offline. I'm not sure if that's related to getting the new machine or not. I wasn't following that too closely. But it doesn't sound like you have a comment on that. So
I also noticed it was offline, but I didn't have a chance to create an issue yet.
excuse me, I'll follow up with Joe, I guess, or unless you create an issue, then he'll get pinged. I did want to talk about back up at the download stats, or sorry, was it download stats, or where was it? I said I would follow up with the good first issue stuff, help wanted issues. There was a list, there was a site that had a list of sites, and on that list of sites, there's a couple that are, this is for the globally help wanted and beginner issues. So there was one site that was an automatic aggregation, and I noticed last week there was an OpenJDK test repo issue on there, but it's gone now, so maybe it got resolved. But there's no OpenJ9 issues, so I don't know why it doesn't pick up our issues, but it seems to be broken. And there was another site that has basically you can open a pull request to add your project to it, but they only recognize good first issue, which we don't use that label. And there was another site that was basically the same thing, except they have multiple different labels, and you could say which label you use for the good first issue. So I noticed we have help wanted and beginner. Is there any other issue label we should point at for that site? Or are those the only two labels we use?
Well, I guess we could start adding other issues, other labels, if that helps us get advertised.
Well, it's just whatever we use as a project to identify good first issue labels or good first issues. So if it's beginner and help wanted, we can stick with those for now. I noticed Omar has the same ones, but they also have first contribution, which because
I think that's automated in some way. The first contribution,
okay.
the
So
GitHub Action somehow recognize it's your first contribution and add that label and print a message.
okay, so it's is that a PR label then? Is that a thing? Yeah. Okay, maybe that's what it is. I don't see any issues with that label. Okay.
So I noticed somebody who created a PR, some GitHub text showed up congratulating them on their first contribution. So
Okay. And I guess I'll add all the other repositories like docs and website and stuff like that, unless there's any objections.
So I don't even know if the labels that we have, I don't know that we created them. They might have come with our GitHub account.
I think it comes with good first issue by default. So I think we've switched that to help wanted and beginner.
Okay, interesting. What if we look at
I haven't looked at our other repositories yet to see for the website if we use the same ones.
so these are probably the default ones. Yeah, and I do see good first issue and help wanted.
I see help wanted on the website. Okay, well, I'll go through and
Maybe we should just rename our one that's called beginner to good first issue. That's some standard thing
we could.
people know about and look for. What?
I don't know if you need a vote on that or something, but
I'm not hearing any objections. I think we'll write it into the minutes, and Dan's not on the call. Pass it by him and see if he has any objections, and then just do it.
okay. I'll draft the PRs until I hear back from that then.
What other? Let's check OMR.
The other thing I have to come up with is a list of tags to describe the project. So I might just ping you privately for that one to confirm what I come up with.
So looking at OpenJ9 OMR, where we probably haven't done much to change the labels that just came automatically. Like obviously we've added some, but I don't know why we would have gone and changed good first issue to beginner, yet we have beginner. So I'm thinking that maybe that's what it used to be called, and now it's called good first issue instead. When you create a new repo.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, and there's first contribution.
Okay, so if I do a new repo, I get good first issue and help wanted.
Yeah, I don't know what other
So
repos we might have. OpenJ9 OMR is an old one. I'm blanking on what other old ones we might have.
So propose to begin with the good first issue, since that would get us onto that epic as well. Because yeah, good first issue seems more standard than beginner. Okay.
Okay. Minutes. Okay, so I think we're in any other business. Is Babmeet on for OpenJDK method handles?
Yes, Peter. I have a very minor update. I think the state is very similar to what was last week. We are looking into failures and fixing them. And I think we have merged a number of fixes in the last week, and the same is happening in this week as well. So no major updates for this week. Back to you, Peter.
Thanks. Devin, any updates on Cmake?
Yeah, the Windows issue that we're seeing the failure in the tests. I managed to track that down. That was a missing source file that added some metadata to our structured exception handler. So I updated that PR, and that should be good now. And then, yeah, working back on the ZOS issues.
Okay. I'll check the PR. I don't know if you made a comment to let people know that it had been updated. I haven't.
Yeah, because I just cracked the issue last night, so I updated it this morning.
Okay, I just haven't seen that yet. Thanks. What's next? The Helm and operator discussion. Marius, any updates?
So Sue updated the release notes for 0.24 release to include info about the Helm chart for JITServer. So going forward, I think we may have to always do this technique where we update the release after the facts, because we need the release to appear at a Docker Hub as a container, and after that we can release the Helm chart. But that's fine, I guess. A few days of delay shouldn't be a problem, unless you have a better approach to this.
No, I guess that's just the way things will have to be.
Yeah. And regarding the blog, so Chris has posted a draft about the Helm chart in the OpenJ9 blogs, and the draft is open for reviews at the moment.
So I saw the doc update, but it's only in the draft docs at the moment.
In the draft?
Yeah. It's not live. So we have the site that I'm showing right now is the draft site.
Okay, I have to talk to Sue then. I thought it went all the way.
Yeah, you can see that at the top it says this site hosts the draft documentation, and if you go to the real site, it hasn't been updated. So I'm just wondering when we might update that.
Okay, I'll talk to Sue about it.
And then I'm going to take that text and I'm going to copy it into, we have the GitHub release notes. So I'll just add that text into these release notes. So if people are looking at those release notes, they'll see it.
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay.
Thank you, Peter.
Okay, we have our next MicroJit meeting on March 11th, which is tomorrow.
Yes.
Unless there's anything else, we'll move into Dan's topic about rescheduling the call. So as a project lead, he now finds he can't attend this time slot. He did propose a couple of other time slots an hour earlier today, but I know that doesn't work for myself and some other people. So the other possibility was Thursday at 11 a.m. I'm not quite sure how we're going to approach this. We could have a big vote on what the best day is. Maybe create a Slack poll in the OpenJ9 Slack and get people to vote on time slots or suggest other time slots that would work. I know Friday is open for myself as well.
Maybe have a question for a call for times first and then have a vote second.
Right, so first I'm going to propose Thursday at 11.
Yeah, that doesn't work for me.
Okay.
Not that I'm that important, but just...
Yeah, our restriction is that I think the UK people probably prefer that we have it in our morning and not in our afternoon, because that gets pretty late in the day for them. And I don't know what other people's calendars look like, but because of the time zone differences, most of my mornings are booked except for Friday mornings.
Yeah, Friday morning is also Friday afternoon UK time, so that's probably not fair to them either.
Okay, well, I'll do something on Slack to get some input there, and we'll see how that goes. If anybody has any other comments they want to make right now. Otherwise, that's it for today. Thanks for attending.
Thank you. Bye-bye.